Desire is not simple. It is layered, knotted, breathing. And when it slips its leash, it does not ask for consent. It devours. There are forces within us we pretend to understand. Primal instincts cloaked in civility, ritualized in romance, and framed within the polite architecture of modern love. But beneath the perfumes of flirtation and the soft poetry of seduction, something stirs. Something ancient, a hunger for power, wrapped in the velvet of longing. This is not a story of love. This is a story of obsession, of control, of how sexual desire, when twisted, can become a weapon, an invisible leash tightened with a smile. This is the abyss beneath attraction, the dark current under the surface of intimacy. Tonight, we follow that current into history, into the psyche, into the darkened corners of human behavior where pleasure and dominance coil around each other like serpents. Welcome to the psychology of sexual power. Desire often introduces itself as warmth, a gaze that lingers, a voice that lowers, a hand placed gently, just close enough to be noticed. It begins as attention and grows as tension. But what if that tension is not only biological? What if it's also hierarchical? The human brain is hardwired for patterns, for anticipation, for reward. Dopamine fires not in the climax of pleasure, but in the buildup, in the possibility, the potential for power. And so, sexual desire doesn't just pull us toward another body. It positions us within a dance of power dynamics, dominance and submission, exposure and concealment, consent and control. The origins of erotic power. Anthropologists have traced ritualized expressions of sexual power back to the earliest human tribes. Carvings in Paleolithic caves show dominant fertility symbols, gods and goddesses who governed both death and reproduction. In these myths, desire wasn't soft. It was divine, dangerous. To seduce was to conquer. To be desired was to wield influence, however fleeting. From Cleopatra's calculated allure, to the infamous court games of Versailles, to the perfumed letters of Casanova, history is full of individuals who understood one truth. Desire is leverage. It can elevate a nobody into royalty. It can unravel empires. And yet this power is rarely stable. The power of arousal is not possession, but projection. A fantasy shaped by the one who craves. The moment the illusion breaks, so does the spell. Power dynamics in human courtship. From an evolutionary lens, sexual selection is inherently unequal. Darwin himself noted that competition for mates often resulted in selection of traits that signal fitness, but fitness wasn't just physical. It was about perceived dominance. Even in modern dating rituals, echoes remain. Who texts first? Who waits? Who moves closer? Who speaks more? Who breaks eye contact? These are not accidents. They are ancient negotiations, cloaked in modern etiquette. Psychologists have studied these micro-behaviors. Power is not always in who acts, but in who reacts. The one who can provoke desire yet remain unaffected often holds the upper hand. But what happens when that game turns dark? What happens when desire is no longer about connection, but conquest? The obsession loop. When sexual desire meets insecurity or narcissism, the result can spiral into obsession. In psychological studies, such as those involving erotomania, patients believe, without any evidence, that someone, often of higher status, is in love with them. These beliefs become armor, impervious to contradiction. Even outside of clinical diagnosis, the obsessive loop of desire is well documented. Attraction, a sense of longing begins. Reinforcement, the mind replays moments, magnifying them. Fixation, the individual begins crafting a narrative, a personal mythology around the other. Control, fantasy must be preserved. Any deviation is threatening. When desire becomes a story rather than a feeling, the one desired ceases to be a person. They become a symbol, a mirror for the dreamer's hunger. And herein lies the first unsettling truth. Sometimes we don't fall in love with people. We fall in love with the feeling of power they give us when we're wanted. or when we believe we're needed. Consent and illusion. Consent is the ethical cornerstone of any sexual or romantic interaction. But when desire is tainted by control, even consent can be manipulated. People can be seduced into compliance, gaslit into confusing attention with affection, domination with love. Many victims of coercion later report feeling chosen, special, wanted, even while being slowly dismantled by the dynamic. Because when someone says, "You're the only one who understands me," it can feel like intimacy. But sometimes it's a leash. The psychology of grooming, power imbalance, and coercive control, whether in romantic relationships, cults, or even workplace hierarchies, often begins with overwhelming attention, flattery, obsession disguised as admiration. But underneath it all, there's a predator mapping the boundaries of control. Modern echoes, technology, and surveillance. In the digital age, the dynamics of desire have shifted. We now watch each other constantly, through stories, posts, likes, and messages. We curate attraction, algorithmically. Desire has become data. Control has become code. Online obsession is no longer limited to stalkers and fanatics. It can emerge in anyone. A partner checking your last scene, a stranger tracing your photos, a friend interpreting silence as rejection, and with each tap and swipe, the line between attention and surveillance blurs. Is love now measured in watch time? We've felt the pull. We've traced the contour of desire as it hardens into hierarchy. But this was just the surface, the first step into a room with many locked doors. Because what lies beyond the psychological pull is the historical mechanism and the human cost. Let's descend deeper into the stories of those who ruled with seduction and those who were ruled by it, into the clinical anatomy of lust, control, and compulsion, where biology, myth, and madness collide. Are you ready? We'll see you there. Let us look deeper, because beneath the surface of every desire lies a structure, ancient, buried, yet very much alive. This is no longer just a tale of want. This is architecture, a blueprint of psychological mechanics that stretches across time, gender, culture. And here, at this middle layer, we are no longer speaking merely of pleasure. We are speaking of dominance, submission, projection. The sacred and the profane, fused in a ritual older than civilization itself. Psychologists have long grappled with what sexual power is. Is it merely a transaction of gratification? Or is it something darker, something that lingers in the shadows of the self? Carl Jung described desire not as a need, but as a force, a shadow archetype that bends the psyche toward obsession when unacknowledged. Desire unspoken becomes possession, and power, when masked in intimacy, becomes invisible coercion. Consider this. Who holds the power in desire? Is it the one who wants or the one who is wanted? Take the case of Donatien Alphonse François, better known to the world as the Marquis de Sade. In his writings, he collapsed the boundaries between love and control, between need and cruelty. But what he revealed inadvertently was this. The pleasure of domination is often not about the body, it is about the mind, the gaze, the slow realization that another person's boundaries are yours to define or ignore. And the unsettling truth? This logic is not confined to dungeons or dark literature. It lives quietly in corporate offices, on dating apps, behind the practiced smile of influence. Modern studies in psychology show how sexual power can manifest in subtle, everyday performances. The halo effect that lends attractive people undue credibility. The foot-in-the-door techniques used in seduction, small asks before the large ones. Mirroring body language to create false familiarity. Dominance expressed through micro-expressions, how long one holds eye contact, who leans forward first. These are not pickup tricks. They are manipulations of social cognition, tapping into primal scripts coded into our species long before ethics were born. One such script is the sexual double bind. When someone is desired, they are given social value. But when they use that value, they are condemned. Women in particular face this paradox. To be desirable is to be seen. To use that desirability is to be deviant. To reject desire is to be punished. This binds power to shame, a cycle as old as the Garden of Eden. Desire becomes obsession not through intensity, but through imbalance. The more one party holds psychological control, the more the other begins to disappear, first in conversation, then in autonomy, and finally, in identity. This erasure is often mistaken for love. In abusive dynamics, sexual control often masquerades as affection. I just want you to dress that way for me. Why do you need to go out tonight if I'm here? Don't you know how much I want you? Why won't you give in? These phrases sound benign, even romantic, to the untrained ear. But they are blueprints of obsession, of one ego consuming another in the name of intimacy. It is in cults, too, that sexual power finds fertile ground. Leaders like David Koresh or Charles Manson weaponized charisma into divinity, but it was desire that gave them their control. Desire not just for their bodies, but for validation, for salvation, for a place in the story. What happens when someone tells you that their pleasure is your salvation? That their love depends on your submission? Suddenly, the boundaries erode, and what once felt like union becomes subjugation. And yet, the victim often believes it is love, because the language of abuse mimics the language of romance. Foucault once said, "Where there is power, there is resistance." But in the realm of sexual dynamics, the resistance often arrives too late, because desire disarms the rational mind. It convinces you to yield willingly, to become complicit in your own erasure. Obsession, then, is not born from hatred. It is born from hunger, the kind that eats through the soul. And control? Control is the myth we wrap around our needs to make them look like choices. In mythologies across cultures, we see the same cycle. The gods seduce mortals, the mortals fall in love, and then they are punished for wanting too much. Narcissus drowns in his own reflection. Eurydice is lost forever when Orpheus looks back. In Hindu lore, apsaras seduce sages only to destabilize their enlightenment. Sexual power is both divine and disruptive. It has always walked hand in hand with the sacred and the dangerous. And so, cultures have created rituals to contain, to shame, to sanctify. But repression is no cure, only a deeper abyss. In modern society, we have traded temples for media. The performance of sexuality is everywhere. In commercials, in social media algorithms, in celebrity culture where desire becomes currency. Here, the boundaries blur even further. Who is the subject and who is the object? When someone posts a sensual photo, are they empowered, or are they performing empowerment for validation? This is the paradox of contemporary sexual power. Visibility is mistaken for control. But being seen does not always mean being free. In therapy rooms, survivors of sexual coercion often say, "I didn't say no, but I didn't feel like I could say yes either." That liminal space between consent and compliance is the graveyard where countless souls have lost their sense of self. And what is obsession if not the refusal to let go of control? To possess rather than witness? To insist that another must fulfill your fantasy, even if it burns them alive in the process? And yet, not all desire becomes obsession. Not all power becomes abuse. There is another kind, one rooted in mutual recognition, where both choose, both see, and neither seeks to disappear the other. But such intimacy is rare because it requires us to meet not as conquerors or conquests, but as equals in vulnerability, as beings aware of our darkness, but unwilling to weaponize it. And that, perhaps, is the most difficult power of all, to hold back when you could dominate, to desire without consuming. This is where the descent gives way to realization, not a climax, but a quiet rupture, because to truly understand the psychology of sexual power, one must confront what lies on the other side of desire, the emptiness that no one dares name. So, what remains after desire burns out? After the obsession is named, the control exposed, the masks shattered? There is silence. And in that silence, grief. Because we must confront a truth no one prepares us for. Most of us never learned to desire without conquest, to want without control, to be intimate without consuming. We inherited myths, porn, religion, shame, but not intimacy, not the raw, trembling art of simply being with another. And here we return, not to the beginning, but to the child, the boy who saw love only when he obeyed, the girl who felt wanted only when she was silent, the teen who believed pleasure was something to earn, not own. We do not become monsters by choice. We inherit them. We grow into them like hand-me-down clothes stitched with trauma. What begins as protection becomes pattern, and what begins as performance becomes personality. But what if we stopped performing, stopped seducing, manipulating, pleading to be seen? What if power was not measured in conquest, but in restraint? What if the most radical form of sexual power was saying, "I see you, and I will not harm you, even though I could"? Because that is what true control looks like, not domination, but responsibility, to hold another's vulnerability and not flinch, to witness desire and not weaponize it. We talk of love like it is always good, but love without awareness is dangerous. It can excuse obsession, justify possession, sanctify manipulation. In the name of love, people are silenced. In the name of love, people are violated. In the name of love, people vanish. The truth is this: love does not equal safety, only self-awareness does. There is a form of power that does not seduce. It listens, it asks, it waits. It does not seek to possess, but to participate. In such a space, desire is not a threat. It is an offering, a question, a dance, where both lead and both follow. And perhaps that is the only way out of the abyss, not through control, but through compassion. To see desire not as currency, but as conversation. As this story ends, we return to the unspoken question: what do you desire, and why? Who taught you to want the things you do? Who taught you what power feels like? What love should look like? If you strip away the fantasies, the fears, the scripts, what remains? You, naked not in body, but in truth. The abyss never disappears. It whispers, it waits. But you are no longer walking into it blind. You have seen the machinery, named the shadow, felt its weight, and maybe, just maybe, you can now choose. Not from hunger, not from fear, but from awareness. Because that is the quiet revolution. To touch without taking, to see without owning, to love without losing yourself. Desire did not destroy you, it revealed you.